Thank you very much. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And today, I reaffirm Labor's commitment to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples of Australia in our Constitution. Tanya, I thank you for your generous introduction. And through you, I'd like to thank the leadership of the New South Wales branch, your General Secretary, Jamie Clements, all your office holders, officials and staff today. Your work of rebuilding and reform is vital. Thank you for everything you do. The State Labor Parliamentary team, which has worked so hard since 2011, and I know that you have so much more to do between now and March 2015. In John Robertson, you've got a great leader and he leads a great team. Let me acknowledge my remarkable federal colleagues who join me here on the stage today. I am so grateful for the support of our united parliamentary team in Canberra, and I am tremendously fortunate in the quality of the delegation from New South Wales. I'm grateful. But let me also acknowledge New South Wales trade unionists, from Marilyn Isanchin through to Mark Lennon. Every delegate, every activist, you stand up for working people every day. Friends, I will never apologise for representing working people, and I pay respect to the contribution of the Australian trade union movement, from the past to the present to the future. I did in particular want to acknowledge my fantastic deputy. She is a lion of this branch. She's a great voice. She's a great voice for this state and this nation, Tanya Plibersek. And perhaps most importantly, I want to acknowledge the rank and file Labor members. There are people like George Turner from Tweed Heads, a life member. This is George's family. We're all your family, George. Fighting the Nats in the Tiger Country on the north coast for years, making sure that we've re-elected Justine Elliott for a fourth time. There's Scott Rhodes of French's Forest, a 25-year member, tirelessly flying the flag in those currently blue ribbon Liberal booths on the northern beaches and the lower North Shore. No one gets past Scott, I repeat, no one, without a how to vote card. He's apparently even given one to Bronwyn Bishop. And there's Paula Keys from Hinchinbrook, who made thousands of cold calls across the swinging target electorates from the Parramatta headquarters every day, every night of the last campaign. I say to George, Scott and Paula, like all of you in fact in this hall, you have shown more than faith alone. You lift Labor with your belief and your energy. The only thing more remarkable than the patience of our members is your passion. Like every person privileged to be up here on the stage, I can tell you that the view from here of you is the best view in Australian politics. Your energy inspires me. Delegates, coming to this hall, to this great conference, It's one of the great rituals of Australian Labor politics. It is one of the great privileges of a Labor leader's life to be here. When I think about the greats of our movement, the giants of our party who have gathered here in the past, but I know that many of you this weekend will have reflected with some sorrow that the last time we gathered in this room was to farewell Neville Wran. When Frank Ford spoke to a hushed Parliament on the death of John Curtin, he said that Curtin was always a common man, a man of the masses. He strived and struggled among them, and even when he came to the highest place in the land, he was still one of them. In May, I told our Parliament that the same could be said of your Neville Wran. This great man of integrity dominated New South Wales Labor's substance. He defined your style. From everything, from what Paul Keating called his PhD in poetic profanity, to Wran's pragmatism in delivering progress. Neville personified the best of Labor in New South Wales. Federal Labor is deeply indebted to Neville Wran, and through him deeply indebted to all of you. Just as Australia in the modern world is unimaginable without the nation-building reforms of the Hawke and Keating governments, the election and the achievements of the Hawke and Keating governments might have been unthinkable without the leadership, professionalism and judgment of this great branch under that great man. I know times have been tough. You are rebuilding, and I want you to know why it matters so much to Australia that you do rebuild. Because Neville Wran taught Labor in Canberra one thing above all else: we are only strong there when you are strong here. Delegates, we gather at a time when many people in our country and across the world are mourning terrible loss. The past 10 days since the attack on MH17 have been days of sorrow, anger and confusion for so many. The families and friends touched directly by this loss have already suffered greatly. The uncertainty, the obstacles, the indignities of the days since have only deepened their grief. All Australians share in their sadness. We are all affected. We are all involved. And on this we are all agreed that we must see the victims identified, the bodies returned, the police investigation undertaken, and those responsible brought to book. MH17 is a scar on Australian innocence, a deadly catastrophic reminder that the destiny of Australians is joined to the wider world. And if we ever in Australia thought that Australia was a small country, far away without a place in global affairs, this illusion's been dispelled. Together we have built our nation up, through politics and diplomacy, through economy and trade, as a global citizen. It has served us well in recent days. I pay tribute to the work of Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard for securing us our place on the United Nations Security Council. Today our world is more borderless, our people are more connected, and the pace of change is faster than at any time in human history. Like you, I look to the world with hope and optimism. Today our economy is strong, our people are skilled, independent and tough. But our nation's future success is most certainly not guaranteed. Because, delegates, in 2014, our fairness, our prosperity are under siege. Australia cannot afford national complacency as the pace of international change accelerates. There is so much for our nation still to do, so much progress still to be made. Creating jobs and growth, moving to clean energy, investing in new technology, standing up for regional and rural Australia, improving education and skills, supporting small business, modernising health and disability care, seizing the opportunities of the Asian century, saving for retirement, and always, ever always, demanding equal treatment for women in our society. There is so much to do. That's why, as Chris Bowen has said, we need an economy which is innovative, agile, entrepreneurial and embracing of change. This is not inevitable. It requires Labor policy and Labor leadership. To build an Australia that is strong, prosperous and fair, we have to be modern, flexible and innovative. Friends, that is the big picture. That is the Labor project that we must commit ourselves to in the decades ahead. That is what a federal Labor government would do if we were in office today. But delegates, that is not what we are witnessing in Canberra right now. This Abbott government and this hockey budget, they are neither the team nor the plan that Australia requires. The Liberals are cutting where they should be investing. They are hurting those that they should be helping. And they are doing nothing at all where they should be doing the most. Delegates, if Australians want to know the difference between Liberal and Labor, just look at Medicare. There is no better measure of what Labor does, no better proof that Labor is the party that represents and reflects our nation at its best. Medicare is the rock upon which we built modern Australia. For 30 years, Medicare has set the community standard around Australian health, the standard of universality. If there was ever one measure which marks us out as a society rather than a collection of individuals, it is surely Medicare. Medicare declares that the health of any one of us is important to all of us. For 3 decades now, every parent, every person has known this, that if you have nagging asthma, if your child has a rising fever and you're worried that it's something more serious, you can see a GP. It doesn't matter if you've lost your job or if you're flat broke. It doesn't matter that if you work hard but it's the day before payday. You can get the care you need. Your beautiful, precious, unique child can get the care that they need. Your elderly parent can get the care that they need. And as a result, every Australian is healthier. Friends, Medicare is fair and Medicare works. In America, for 6 long years, President Obama has been trying to introduce universality, to take the United States away from its two-tier, unfair, internationally uncompetitive system. It is madness for Australia to go down the American road just when Americans are finally making that long and exhausting U-turn. We do not want American-style healthcare in our home. Medicare doesn't just keep Australians healthy. It makes us more productive. It boosts participation. We have a smart, universal system of primary preventative care. This means fewer sick days. That's good for business. It's good for jobs. And our smart, modern system of funding that care means that our system costs less for taxpayers. Australia spends barely half as much on health compared to the United States as a proportion of its GDP. Put plainly, that's less money for better care, longer life expectancy and greater access. And all of this with no cost to employers and no extra burden on business. This gives us a real head start in the world. Friends, Medicare is fair, Medicare works. So why do the Abbott Liberals hate Medicare so much? Their plans for Medicare are a disgrace. This GP tax, it represents an unconscionable assault on the bottom half of Australia. It turns our hard-working GPs, Australia's medical front line, into tax collectors, taking their time and their attention away from their patients. 2 weeks ago, Catherine King and I presented a petition to the Parliament signed by more than 3,000 medical professionals, 2,500 of them GPs. They know what a GP tax will mean. They understand the pain it will cause. Here's what Dr. Julie McClellan, one of 3,000 GPs, had to say. The Prime Minister should come on a nursing home visit and see if he feels comfortable asking the palliative patient or the confused elderly lady rocking in the corner for their $7. Something tells me that that is one invitation that Tony Abbott or our not-so-average Joe Hockey or Peter Dutton will never accept. And even in the Abbott-Hockey budget, none of this is about money. The GP tax is not being returned to the bottom line, not $1, not 1 cent. This is about philosophy, their philosophy, or more accurately, their prejudice. It is nothing but a plan to destroy the universality of Medicare. Delegates, we know Medicare is fair, Medicare works, and Medicare belongs to the Australian people. Here today, let us tell Australia that Labor will not let the Abbott government take it away. For more than a decade, even the Liberal Party under John Howard knew to keep their hands off Medicare. But what was good enough for Howard is not even good enough for Abbott. Now Tony Abbott wants to wreck Medicare, to demolish it, to lay waste to Australia's smart and fair and strong health system. Delegates, the fight for Medicare is upon us in earnest. It falls to this generation of Labor to again refight and re-win one of the best institutions for fairness and progress in Australia. Loudly and proudly today. Let us make the promise to the Australian people that Labor will fight to the death to preserve bulk billing in this country. We will fight right down to the line for the principle of universal health care. No compromises, no trading, no retreat, no surrender. We and the Labor people before us built the system, Australians depend upon it, and we will not only see the system endure, we will prevail. But it is not just Medicare. Delegates, the crimes in this budget go beyond it. Budget cuts to education, training and skills, devastating. This government's cutting over $5 billion from our universities. They are doubling and tripling the cost of degrees. They are pushing the price of a university education beyond the great, good dream of ordinary families. Who are they? Who are they to force young Australians to choose between a mortgage and a higher education? Who are they to force young women to choose between starting a family and paying off their degree? And training is hit too. Our apprentices lose support for their tools, and in its place they are just pushed into debt. There is insult added to this injury. Not only did the Liberals ambush Australians in the budget, they lied to Australians in the election campaign, and now they even lie about lying. They are not just cutting higher education and training for the future. They are trying to change school education to make it look like the past. We spearheaded crackdowns on bullying and violence in schools, and they've got people who want to bring back the strap. We expanded the teaching of Asian languages. They want to expand the learning about the kings and queens of England. I don't know if you know this Education Minister fellow, Christopher Pyne. Yeah, if you'd met him, you'd remember him. You do know him. He must be the most backward-looking, extreme and out-of-touch Education Minister since Federation. Education is... Labor people know that education is the driver to our future, yet this minister has told his chauffeur to put us into reverse gear. The difference between Liberal and Labor on education is wider than the nullarbor. We believe in needs-based funding for all of our children. The Abbott Liberals, they just believe in the old private versus public arguments. Yesterday, John Robertson made it clear that state Labor would do things very differently as well. Robbo, your plans for schools, TAFE and training are exactly what New South Wales needs, and we will work with you to deliver these plans. The Abbott government cuts to education and training take Australia in the wrong direction. But these cuts are not the exception. They are the Liberal rule. In fact, more than $50 billion will be cut from hospitals in coming years. This number is worth repeating. 50 billion, 50,000 million. These are enormous, unprecedented, federation-changing cuts. It is the equivalent of sacking 1 in 5 nurses, or 1 in 3 doctors, or closing 1 in 13 hospital beds. There is no doubt waiting lists will grow. Waiting times will go up. The sick and the injured will be turned away. Under these Abbott Liberals, the pension age is going up, the pension rate is going down, the senior supplement's gone for good, and superannuation has been frozen. Frugality is their motto. This government's only retirement plan is to make Australians work longer and harder and retire later with less. Shame indeed. There are cuts that hurt families. A family which makes ends meet on $80,000 per year will be $4,000 worse off, and worse off every year. And a family on $65,000 will be $6,000 worse off. In Tony Abbott's Australia, the less you earn, the more you pay. And there are so many more victims of these budget cuts. Our veterans, our Indigenous people, people with disability and carers. None of this happened by accident. This government knew exactly what it was doing and who it was doing it to. And the only thing more terrible than the impact of these willful cuts is that the Liberals now think that the cuts haven't gone far enough. 2 weeks ago, that treasurer, the foghorn leghorn of Australian politics, Joe Hockey, he blustered that if these cuts are blocked, he will go further, with cuts that would bypass the scrutiny of Parliament. And now we read in his new biography that the Treasurer believes the budget should have been tougher. If this is what an authorised biography reveals, imagine what the unauthorised biography would reveal. This arrogant, cigar-chomping Treasurer, his hopeless story reveals that it took Tony Abbott to block him from deeper, harder cuts. Seriously, if it's up to Tony Abbott to tell you you've gone too far, then you've well and truly gone too far. I mean, as much as they are, privately, the Liberals can't just blame Joe Hockey. He's only a symptom. He's not the cause. This is a government unravelling from the centre and rotting from the top. If it's not ministers boasting about secret plans for cuts or Liberals speculating about leadership succession, it's a $22 billion paid parental leave scheme where only Rupert Murdoch was consulted. And of course, there's a plan for knights and dames where even John Howard was out of the loop, but he's still at the letterbox waiting for the note. Joe Hockey's talk of more cuts is hardly a surprise. We already knew that the government wants to drive further down this road because we've seen the government's roadmap. The Commission of Audit drew it for them. The Commission of Audit report is the plan that Tony Abbott asked for, the plan that Joe Hockey paid for, and the plan that the Liberals are hungry to implement. Here is the destination the Conservative side of politics has set for itself. Completely abolishing Family Tax Benefit Part B, a $15 GP tax, a hospital tax, a lower state-based minimum wage, delaying the National Disability Insurance Scheme. When the Liberals talk about looking for alternatives, these are their alternatives. When they say they want to go further, this is where they want to go. Believe it or not, this is the Australia that the Liberals believe in. Of course it's unfair, because they are the Liberal Party of Australia. But this budget doesn't just hurt Australians today. It will hurt Australia tomorrow. It is not just conservative, it is regressive. It is capital C conservative, the like of which this nation has not seen for a very long time. This is a budget brought to you by a Conservative Prime Minister who does not see it as his duty to care for everyone, by a Conservative Treasurer whose personal comfort in life has robbed him of charity and, I might say, judgment, by a Conservative government which governs only for those it sees as its core constituency. We know the budget failed the fairness test. The budget fails the future test. Take just one example: climate change. It is no coincidence that one of the fundamental questions for our future is one of their fundamental policy failures. How is it that they can believe in a price signal to punish the sick and the vulnerable, but not to punish polluters? They love freedom so much that they've made pollution free. Delegates, Labor will fight and fight and fight again for real action on heat-trapping greenhouse gases. The Fraser government abolished Medicare for a while, but it couldn't kill the dream of universal health care. The Abbott government may have stalled action on climate change, but they can't stand in the way forever. Delegates, Australians are better than this Liberal government, and Australia deserves better than this Liberal government. This is where we come in, friends. Only Labor can modernise Australia. Only Labor ever does. The responsibility falls to this generation of Labor, and only a modernised Labor can modernise the country. Only a government which sets aside vested interests and outdated thinking can seize the future to succeed in our country. Labor has to be as modern confident, democratic and outward-looking as we want Australia to be. No person, no group is immune from self-interest. Everyone on every side has to give some ground. If we want to change the country, we have to change. And if we want to change the government, we have to change. In so many ways, New South Wales is leading the way. I congratulate you on the lead you've taken on rebuilding Labor. You've made enormous progress over the past 2 years, and you've made important progress over the past 2 days. That's good, because this is urgent. We all know what has to be done, and we don't have forever to do it. There's a lot of detail and a lot of debate, as there should be. But I'm here to state a very clear direction. Labor has to rebuild. We have to rebuild as a party of members, not factions. A bigger, bolder, broader party, 100,000 strong. A party where your membership card entitles you to genuine participation in the choice of our leaders, our candidates, our policies and our dreams of Australia. A party where there are more people, more involved, more often. That's the direction that this branch has set. But we now have to complete the schematic to make it obvious to everyone what Labor stands for and how we conduct ourselves. Delegates, change in our society never stops, and the work of our movement is never done. There are always new threats to our security, new competitors for our economy, and old unfairness re-emerging in new forms. And to all those who would say that the sun has set on the House of Labor, that the great battles have been fought, that the great races have been run and won, that our society is now fair, that the politics of progress are fulfilled, that the free market can take it from here, I say, tell that to a young job seeker in our suburbs or to a worker retrenched in our towns. They'll tell you as long as there are not enough jobs for people who want to work, we still have work to do. Tell that to a young student who's been racially abused on public transport. They'll tell you as long as there are still people who want the right to be a bigot, we've still got work to do. Tell people that Labor's day is done. Tell that to a tourism operator watching the Great Barrier Reef die through the bottom of her glass boat. She'll tell you that until we have real action on climate change, Labor's still got work to do. Tell it to a teacher without the resources to teach children who need the most help how to read and write and count, much less just fulfil their potential in the modern world. That teacher will tell you that while we don't have great schools, there is a job of work for Labor to do. Tell it to a country person waiting for the disability insurance scheme to reach their town. They'll tell you that as long as Australians living with disabilities are exiled to a second-class life in their own country, Labor, our Labor, your Labor still has a job to do. And indeed, perhaps even this, until the only test of whether you can get married is whether you love each other, Labor's still got work to do. Delegates, we meet here in this hall upon the shoulders of the giants who've come before us. It falls to this generation, be it 17 or 70, to reject complacency. We have no time for lethargy or shoulder shrugging. As long as there are budgets like this Abbott-Hockey Budget, as long as there are governments like this Liberal government, as long as there are leaders who think it is their job to cut jobs, cut wages, cut pensions, cut education, cut health, then Labor in Australia, you, us, me, all of us, we still have work to do. Thank you very much.